It is virtually an iron law of history that a country's attitude towards other countries is influenced by its own history. Therefore, if we want to understand the deeper roots of the misunderstanding within the United States and China, we have to study and understand well the different historical perspectives that US and China have. Indeed, their historical perspectives could not be more different. American attitudes towards the world are influenced by the 100 years of triumph it experienced since the days of Teddy Roosevelt at the beginning of the 20th century. By contrast, China's attitudes are influenced by the 100 years of humiliation it experienced after the middle of the 19th century. When 100 years of triumphalism meets 100 years of humiliation, the potential for misunderstanding is enormous. This is why we need to have a deep understanding of the different historical perspectives of the US and China. It's clear when China's century of humiliation began. It began with the defeat of China in the First Opium War of 1839 to 1842. After the British defeated China, China was forced to cede Hong Kong to the British for 150 years. This is why President Xi Jinping said in 2017 that when Hong Kong was returned to China, it washed away the Chinese nation's 100 years of shame. Notice the phrase, 100 years of shame. Virtually all Chinese know what this phrase means. Most Americans don't know the meaning. Most Chinese also know well how the Opium War came about. During the 18th century, there was trade between Britain and China. The British purchased Chinese luxury goods such as tea, porcelain, and silk, and paid for it in silver. This obviously created a major trade imbalance in favor of China. In an effort to remove this trade imbalance, the British East India Company began smuggling large quantities of opium to China. These British smuggling efforts succeeded well. By 1833, around 30,000 chests of opium were being smuggled into China. The illegal opium trade managed to reverse the trade imbalance in Britain's favor, resulting in a large-scale drain of silver from China. No society would like to see its society damaged with an opium addiction. Indeed, the British had themselves banned the use of opium in their own country. So Lin Shechu, the Qing commissioner in Guangzhou, tried to use moral arguments to persuade the British to stop smuggling opium to China. He wrote an open letter to Queen Victoria, urging her to halt the opium trade, highlighting its harm to the Chinese people. These moral arguments failed. China had no choice but to use force. It attempted to forcibly confiscate opium supplies in Guangzhou, eventually ordering a blockade of foreign ships. But the British government, using their superior firepower, overcame the Chinese military forces easily in the First Opium War. This defeat in the Opium War was only the first of many terrible things that happened to China in the following 100 years. After the First Opium War, China signed the Treaty of Nanjing, through which it was forced to cede Hong Kong to Britain and open up 5 ports for international trade: Shanghai, Guangzhou, Ningbo, Fuzhou, and Xiamen. China was also forced to pay $21 million in silver to Britain as indemnity. In addition, China had to allow Western powers to set up settlements in Shanghai. Even though these settlements were on Chinese territory, no Chinese laws could be enforced there. The Western powers enjoyed extraterritorial powers. It was in Shanghai that there allegedly used to be a sign saying, "No dogs or Chinese allowed in this park." China suffered even more after losing the Second Opium War. It had to sign the Treaty of Tianjin in 1858 with Britain, France, and other Western powers. This unequal treaty stipulated the opening of 10 additional ports for trade. China also had to pay additional indemnities totaling $8 million in silver to Britain and France. These territorial concessions were terrible and humiliating, yet something even worse happened at the end of the Second Opium War in 1860. The British and French forces decided to carry out a savage act of revenge because Chinese officials had killed 20 British and French troops who had gone to Beijing as part of a contingent to negotiate a truce. Now, many of us were shocked when the Taliban decided to destroy 2 ancient Buddhist statues in Bamiyan, Afghanistan in 2001. This was barbaric. However, what the British and French forces did to the Summer Palace was far more barbaric. Victor Hugo, the famous French writer, described the Summer Palace as one of the wonders of the world, comparing it to the Parthenon in Greece and the Colosseum in Rome. However, its scale was much bigger. Today, if a Chinese army were to invade Europe and destroy the British Parliament and Buckingham Palace, burn down the Notre Dame, loot the Louvre and the Vatican, this Chinese army would have done less damage than what the British and French forces did in 1860. It was one of the most barbaric acts of human history. Few Europeans remember it. The Chinese remember it well. The big question here is, what went wrong with China? The answer is long and complicated. Historians will debate how China got humiliated for centuries. For us, we need to understand a few essential facts. First, until the 19th century, the Chinese civilization had been one of the most successful civilizations and had successfully survived many shocks. Second, as the 19th century opened, China had enjoyed 200 years of peace and prosperity under the Qing dynasty, especially under the long reign of Emperor Qianlong from 1735 to 1796. This long period of peace and prosperity clearly produced complacency in China. Third, China had relatively weak rulers in the 19th century. However, as the subject of China's relations with the rest of the world is enormously complex, it is fortunate that we will also be hearing in this course the views of 2 distinguished experts, Professor Wang Gangwu and Mr. Giorgio. The destruction of the Summer Palace and the military defeats should have been a wake-up call for China. Curiously, while this humiliation of China woke up Japan, China's neighbor, it did not wake up China. The Japanese made an all-out effort to study the strengths of Western civilization. After doing so, they decided to modernize and industrialize their country. They also invested in a strong military, including a strong navy. By contrast, the Chinese Empress Dowager diverted the funds set aside to build a Chinese navy. She used them to build, for example, the expensive marble boat in the palace garden. These contrasting responses of China and Japan to the rise of Western powers led to the second wave of humiliation China would suffer, this time at the hand of its neighbor, Japan. And in the next segment, we will look at the second wave of humiliation.